United Nations estimates that Nigeria's population is set to double by 2050 to around 400 million people, which will make it the world's third largest nation behind India and China. Now, it has a land mass of over 923,000 kilometers square. 400 million people, that's excluding visitors. Where would they live? Well, the planning should start now, don't you think? Especially since there seems to be a general opinion that there's already a deficit of 17 million.
When you come to mainland part of Lagos, for instance, for you to get a space will be difficult. So you could see the complexity at ascribing a peculiar figure to housing need in Nigeria.
To further complicate issues of housing, incidents of collapse has become worrisome in the country.
Where we get to a point where a building is distressed and that upon our findings, such building has to be removed, then we put the sign of remove.
The complexities in housing Nigerians is what Big Story is focusing on this time. Let's do this together. I'm Ini John Mekwa. This is home to a family of 4 in Uyo, the Akwa Ibom State capital. It's a single room without windows, cracked roof, and almost all sides packed with clothes and other personal belongings of the residents. Washing, bathing, showering, and cooking are all done outside in areas not too convenient and shared with other residents. It's safe to say that the residents have settled here for lack of better alternative. Living on water should be a luxury, but not in Makoko in Lagos. Here it is a necessity. Plank houses is the norm, but their state and availability of health facilities takes away the comforts which residents should enjoy. Their life goes from the plank structures which can barely hold a family of 4 to the canoe, which serves as a means of earning income, since a lot of them find it convenient to fish. In the hinterlands, especially in the northern parts of the country, houses made of clay still serve as homes for many families, mostly built in communal styles, with each family occupying about 3 houses which make up a compound. Still in the north, Bauchi State to be precise, necessity has born what many call invention. There are houses built on rocks. The rocks stretch from Gombe Road gates to communities in Bauchi metropolis. Some of the buildings are of clay, others are of blocks, but none looks like a luxurious place to reside in, and this is nothing compared to the risks.
The rocks actually expand because of the heating of the sun, and they contract at night. In the daytime they expand, at night they contract. And because of the unequal contraction and cooling, it can lead to fracturing. Then the rock will now start peeling. Immediately there is crack in a rock, water will go in, water will now start chemical weathering. The fracturing is, physical weathering, while the dissolving is the chemical weathering. And in such, you have some houses near that don't really know what is happening. So the rocks is giving way, disintegrating gradually, becoming weak. And when it becomes weak, it cannot no more hold the bigger lot on top. You see them rumbling, right? Some in form of boulders, some in form of exfoliation. When they are removed, they are peeled up, they rumble down. Now, what are the reasons actually that made people build on these hard rocks? They build because you don't need to pay for foundation. It is strong enough to host a strong build, to host a building, no matter the size of the building. But the problem is the rock itself is getting weaker every day, which means the foundation that you thought will last is getting weaker every day. I tell you that it is risky because the rock do not contain the adequate amount of quartz that can stabilize it and make it last. If you look at Warinji, most of the upper part of the bauxite have been weathered to big boulders, and there is excessive exfoliation, meaning that most of the minerals that form the rock are not very stable on the surface, so they are giving way. So you see there is tendency for a lot of slumping, I could say, or mass wasting, which can affect those buildings and affect the people as well.
It's a contrast in the highbrow areas where there are structures which showcase creative craftsmanship and luxury on display in many of the urban areas across the country. Ike Naudiachi is a homeowner in Lagos who seems to have studied the required strategy to survive in the sector.
It would probably not be truthful or fair to say owning a house in Lagos is a big problem or is not. It's dependent on the uniqueness of the conditions that you are playing in. Talking about the finances, what's your budget? You know, every problem, including the housing problem in Lagos and by extension Nigeria, is solvable by money. And now, in that sense, when you talk about finances, your budget should determine where you go to look for something. For instance, if you have a certain budget, if you have 10 million naira and you want to own a property, you shouldn't go looking in Banana Island. You shouldn't go looking in certain places. You must know what your budget is and the place that can host your budget and stick with it. Then with regards to Omonile and all of that, I think that if you just do what is called due diligence, if you consult a proper consultant, property consultant, a lawyer, then you are in good stead if you get someone who advises you properly. I would say if finding anything of value has a requirement and responsibility on you, the seeker, to do due diligence.
Many would say that Mr. Odiachi has this view because his purchasing power may be above average. But according to the United States National Library of Medicine, the towns and cities have grown with pace of urbanization in Nigeria showing extraordinary high rates of between 5 to 10% per annum, bringing about rapid expansion of Nigerian cities area to a tenfold to their initial point of growth. This has led to unplanned demand of housing and hiking prices as is normal when demand exceeds supply. Empirical studies have also shown that about 75% of the urban settlers live in slums and improper housing, and this is while many of the exotic buildings lie unoccupied.
If you go to highbrow area, such as Ikoyi, such as Maitama in Abuja, or Asukoro, yeah, there is something you will discover. Some of the buildings are unoccupied. But when you come to mainland part of Lagos, for instance, for you to get a space will be difficult. So you could see the complexity at ascribing a peculiar figure to housing need in Nigeria. And the problem arises from lack of appropriate statistics. People were saying 70 million deficit of housing units. How did we arrive at that? For over 10 years, or up to 15 years or more, we kept on mentioning 70 million housing deficit. Then let us go practical. That was why I tried to suggest that some part of our cities, there's obvious lack of accommodation. While in some other areas, you have empty buildings not being occupied, majorly because of cost, affordability. So invariably, we are in a nation where demand and supply has not been generally ascribed in certain areas or does not really fit in. So in Ikoyi, we can't say there is deficit because many buildings are unoccupied. But on the Lagos Island, for you to get a space is very difficult. We are talking of Adeniji area, where you have the Emporium, the marketplace, Isaleko, and so on. That place is densely populated, where it is difficult for you to get a room.
While the provision of accommodation has become largely the responsibility of individuals, the federal government has its role, which is basically to formulate policy and coordinate, construct and monitor housing programs and projects through the Ministry of Works and Housing, which is currently led by Mr. Babatunde Fashola. One of the steps of the federal government has been to reduce the burden of funding through the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria, backed by the National Housing Fund, which is assigned to play the central banking role in the mortgage banking system. It will engage in wholesome transactions and control the activities of the primary mortgage institutions.
This is work in progress. The important thing is that the sector is changing. The sector is providing more access to housing finance, both in the area of construction finance and mortgages. And we might not be where we intend to be, but we're making progress. Previously, you hardly can walk into any organization, any mortgage institution, primary mortgage institution, as it were, as they were known then, to get a 5-year mortgage, to get a 10-year mortgage. Most of those institutions were really not properly capitalized to be able to provide long-term funding, which is the basic driver for mortgage provision. So, but now you can walk into a mortgage bank and arrange to get a home on mortgage, not on a cash and carry basis.
The National Housing Fund Act requires that a Nigerian worker who earns an income of 3,000 naira and above per annum in both private and public sector shall contribute 2.5% of his basic monthly salary to the fund. Every commercial or merchant bank shall invest in the fund 10% of its loans and advances at an interest rate. Every registered insurance company shall invest a minimum of 20% of its non-life funds and 40% of its life funds in the real property development, of which not less than 50% shall be paid into the fund. And the federal government is saddled with the responsibility to make adequate financial contributions to the fund for the purpose of granting long-term loans and advances for housing development. However, going by the number of deficit, it seems either many Nigerians are not aware of this or the mortgage banks are not playing the role sufficiently.
We really didn't have a mortgage market, as it were. What we used to have was mere, maybe housing finance, construction finance, building loans, and things like that. The economy wasn't accommodating of long-term deposits, as it were. Everybody is interested in the 90-day cycle, 60 days deposits, which are really not suitable for mortgage financing. But today things are changing. The awareness is being created, the sector is being restructured. The mortgage banks have recapitalized to a minimum of 2.5 billion for state licenses and 5 billion for national licenses. And this is also creating more awareness with such capital. You can go out, you can advertise, you know that when you advertise, you can back up your advertisement with product delivery.
Some states, such as Lagos, have birthed the Lagos Home Ownership and Mortgage Scheme, which is aimed at aiding Lagosians to acquire homes. The scheme, which was birthed by former Governor Babatunde Fashola in 2011, has made many people homeowners. However, the rate of activity in the scheme seems to have decreased in recent times.
The Lagos Mortgage Board is a board that oversees the pre-qualification and qualification of applicants. But with the present deficit that exists in Lagos in terms of housing, we we are told from the report that we will need to go into active construction of houses. We will need 185,500 units every yearly in the next 5 years to bridge the gap.
Other state governments have initiated low-cost housing schemes. Most of these are self-contained and make up estates open to residents of the state. But even this scheme seems not low-cost enough for average residents.
To be able to marry cost with building, the type of building. And that was why we have been experimenting, researching on low-cost materials, or material that we can use for low-cost housing, that will be durable and cheap in a way. But you see, the cycle of our people is that of block and mortar. That is, they prefer buildings with blocks for now, rather than buildings with planks, with timber or PVC or other materials. But research continues to overcome this cost challenge.
The issue of funding in the housing sector has dire consequences. Many potential homeowners and developers have resorted to cutting corners to reduce cost. Also, the use of substandard building materials, since the good quality materials seem to be expensive, as most of them are imported. "43 notable buildings collapsed in the country in 2019, out of which 17 was in Lagos State. This poses the question of the existing regulatory framework in the state and country.
Where we get to a point where a building is distressed and that upon our findings, such building has to be removed, then we put the sign of remove. That does not take time, really. The law says that we should do certain statutory steps in terms of giving notices, because people have been living in such houses. So when we do that, we also engage the owners, the occupiers, to tell them that this is an urgent one and that they have to move fast.
Another way to go about the issue has been to foster closer working relationship with individuals involved in the various stages of the construction.
Most of the block makers we have in Nigeria nowadays, they are not doing proper blocks. They did not follow the specification of the SON, Standard Organization of Nigeria. And if they say the block is causing the collapse of building, I can say yes. If I say the block is not cause the building collapse, I can say yes. It is the cause of the structural engineer, which people are not supervising their job properly. If they ask them to use, let's say, 16 mm for the beams or columns, the contractor or the developer, they will use 12 mm. That is why when they put the load after the concreting, the thing will give away.
According to the SON, we have two types of blocks. We have ratio 1:6, that is a load-bearing block. We have ratio 1:8, that is non-load-bearing blocks. The load-bearing blocks was supposed to be using for the foundation of a building, while the non-load-bearing is supposed to be used for partitioning. But with the cost of the block, according to the SON, if you say we are going to produce it, a non-load-bearing block is going to cost like about 400 naira or 450 per 9 inches block. So these are some of the things they believe the masses, the Nigerians, will not be able to patronize the block. But if the government, if the SON, who is the government agency, if they can go out to control the standard of production of block, in which we are working with them now. We've held a meeting with them. sometimes last in December, and there are some agreements together with that are registered, because they said we should obtain our MAMCA form. That is a MAMCA mandatory form, which the SON is going to give to every block model as a satisfied block model to produce block in Nigeria. So we are under the processing of that. But those who did not join the association, we are employing them according to the communique they sent to us, that they should go out, including those of us who are members, to control the quality. If the quality is controlled, people will not be selling cheap blocks. Because if you produce the standard, you have to sell to make gain.
The private sector, working closely with the government through the Nigerian Institute of Building, was created for times such as this to enshrine the laws in the minds of the professionals in the field and provide well-trained and trusted personnel who would ensure that the quality of materials are in top-notch.
How could a building develop to a certain height without being identified in an area? The building that collapsed in Ikoyi late last year had no building plan approval. Ikoyi of all places, which is an eyebrow area. The building was under construction. So, it shows that the monitoring system also have to be worked on to be able to get result. And where buildings are collapsing under construction, you need to find out who are the people handling the construction. Were they certified to handle construction? Because the major problem we are having in Nigeria is consequence. If you start to punish those who create this problem for us, others will desist from embarking on construction carelessly. Impunity is what a society should not allow to thrive. So, what we are saying in the first that if the plans of buildings have been vetted by the physical planning sector, that is, the architectural drawing designed by a qualified architect will be vetted and approved, then we don't expect much issue there. Similarly, the structural drawings designed by a structural engineer, once such a drawing is vetted and approved, there should be no issue.
Apart from the benefits of living well and having a more productive human resources when well accommodated, housing can also create jobs through the engagement of artisans and craftsmen, not to mention professional builders. But of course, it is important to also ensure that buildings are of high quality. Well, that's our story. Thank you so much. Don't forget that you can send in your comments and questions and do watch Big Story as much as you want on our YouTube channel. Bye for now. I'm Ini John Mekwa.